Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. Today is going to be the second episode of our Montreal Canadiens off-season series. The last episode was all about the expansion draft. I talked about who I thought the Habs would protect. I talked about who I thought the Kraken would take. And I got to tell you, I thought I had it locked down. I thought I was bang on. I knew it was possible to be wrong, but I did not expect how wrong I was. Of course, I uploaded that video, and then just a couple hours later, the news about Shea Weber's injury broke. He was going to be left unprotected, and I thought, okay, I'm still fine. I don't think Seattle's going to take Shea Weber. I think they're still going to stick with Jake Allen. Of course, Carey Price waives his no-move clause, and Jake Allen's protected, and now I'm wondering, okay, so now I'm wrong about who Seattle's going to take. But now the Canadiens going to lose Carey Price? Like, what's going on? And then, of course, now today, the expansion draft, we're still about 5 hours away, but all the picks have been leaked. And Cale Fleury appears to be the player that is going to Seattle, which I think for the Canadiens is not the worst thing in the world in terms of losing a key part of the roster right now, but it is a prospect that they lose, which kind of sucks. But there's still some things we got to sort out. Are there going to be side deals? We might see that, and that would really suck if that's the case, because today's video is all about the entry draft, and if the Canadiens end up trading their 31st pick to prevent Seattle from taking Carey Price, this would be another video of mine that becomes pretty irrelevant pretty quickly. So I'm hoping that that's not the case. So the entry draft is this Friday, and as I mentioned, the Canadiens are drafting 31st overall. Technically it's 30th because Arizona had to forfeit their first round pick this year, which is not good for them because they're already kind of short on prospects. But that means the Canadiens have the 30th overall pick, which means they should be able to get a decent player, but probably not as high as in years past, especially with the draft this year not necessarily being at its peak, not necessarily being the strongest draft. And of course, this year it's also a unique year because a lot of these players have not really played a whole lot because of the pandemic. So looking at the Canadiens, they've got their first round pick, they've got 2 seconds, they've got 2/3, they've got 3/4. They have a 5th, but it's actually the Flyers, not their own. And then they have a 6th and a 7th round pick. Because we don't know exactly what's going on with Shea Weber, we don't know if they're going to get full cap relief. I don't want to put them on IR just yet and act like they have that cap space. We've got Cale Fleury going to Seattle, but beyond Shea Weber, that's it. In terms of right defensemen, they've got Jeff Petrie and Josh Brook. All of the Canadiens' top defensive prospects, Romanoff, Harris, Struble, Gooley, Norlinder, they're all left shot defensemen. So, we can put Weber on IR just to kind of show you that's it. They have no other right defenseman right now signed. So I'm curious if during this draft, the Canadiens look at that and say, okay, we've got to start looking to draft some right defensemen. So leading into that, let's start talking about some prospects that the Canadiens can look at, starting with right defenseman. The first player we'll look at is Scott Morrow. The Habs, we talked about, need more beef on the right side of the blue line. They need more bodies, regardless of who it is. Shea Weber's health is a huge question mark, and all the best defensive prospects, as we mentioned, are left-handed. Josh Brook is your best right-handed defenseman, and while I think he's still got a chance to make the NHL, he's not going to be much more than a bottom-pairing guy at this point, I think. So Scott Morrow would fit in nicely in an organization that could use more depth at his position. Morrow's a smooth-skating, puck-moving defenseman who's got really good offensive upside. He's more of a modern-day defenseman, meaning that he may eventually take Weber's spot on the blue line, but he will not be Shea Weber. He's got the capabilities to be a considerable part of the Canadiens' core for years to come if he develops properly. He may not be a top pairing guy, it kind of remains to be seen, but he has top 4 capabilities and he's got good size. He's 6'2", and he's going to add more weight over the next couple of years, and he's definitely an exciting option for the Canadiens. The one question is he played at a prep school, so the quality of competition may not be as high as some other prospects in this draft, but you can see that the tools are there. He might be a bit more of a project, so he won't be ready in 2 years, but his upside seems to be pretty high. At 31, Morrow is a good option for the Habs. Another option for the Habs is Corson Ceulemans. another right shot defenseman who's got tremendous upside as a potential top 4 guy. Now, Kuhlman's is expected to go a little higher than where the Habs are picking, like mid-teens to early 20s. But I have seen some scouts suggest he could go later, which is good for the Habs. And if Montreal wants, they could use one of their second-round picks to move up if they need to. They have the assets to move up in this draft if they think it's necessary. Kuhlman's is a fluid skating defenseman who's got great offensive upside and a tremendous shot from the point. The Habs need offense from the point. And especially losing Shea Weber, this is an important aspect they have to address. His defensive game could use some improvement to get to the next level, which is why some people aren't as high on him, but his offensive game allows him to be effective. The Habs' right side of the blue line is, well, let's face it, it's kind of old, or it just doesn't really exist. When Kuhlman's reaches the NHL, he can be able to take some of that load off of Jeff Petrie, and at his peak, he can quarterback the Habs' power play. The Habs need to add to the right side of their blue line, regardless of who it is. We've talked about this. There's barely any bodies there. Adding one of Morrow or Kuhlman's would be a great get for the Canadiens, even if it means having to trade up to do it. If the Canadiens want to go forward, there are options there as well that we can explore. If they want to go with the best player available philosophy, they can take their centers and their right wings. But I do think they need to be addressing the left wing pipeline, much like they do the right defenseman pipeline. The Habs are deep at center, and they're deep at right wing. Too deep, in fact. All year, they had right wingers playing on their offside. And some of the best prospects they've got coming up through the system, the Cole Caulfields, the Jesse Alonens, they're all right wingers. They all have right shots. Here are some players that they can look at that are left shots that can help them address some needs to fill in that pipeline. Zachary Leroux is of interest because he has a lot of skills and plays a similar style to Brendan Gallagher. He has an edge, and he plays with it, but he has crossed the line on more than one occasion. 4 times, in fact, which makes him a risk, as his maturity has been questioned. His skills are there, and he is definitely a first-round pick, but he might fall because of those question marks. When he's playing, he's not afraid to mix it up. He's not afraid to be physical, and he will cause disturbances. He lays it all on the line. Does that sound familiar? Leroux may not be the biggest, he's only 5'11", but he plays like a power forward, and he has a powerful but shifty stride, and he possesses a great shot that can beat goalies. He has tremendous upside as a potential top 6 forward, and a chance to be one of the better power forwards in the game. If Leroux can reach his potential and keep himself in check, he will be the type of player you love to hate. At 31, he could be a good pick for the Habs. Another option at left wing is Oskar Alusson, a goal-scoring left winger from Sweden. Alusson possesses a blistering shot, one that will be able to beat NHL goalies very early on in his career, and he's a great skater too. He's also an excellent 200-foot player and can be trusted defensively, something that Montreal values very highly, especially in young players. If he develops appropriately, he can be an effective player and might even slot in well on a line with Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. Or the Habs can give Jesperi Kotkaniemi a sniper of his own. Either way, Alusson would be a good pickup for the Habs. Unfortunately, he may not be available by then, as some scouts are very high on him and view him as a top 20 prospect. But again, the Habs have the assets to move up in the draft if they deem it necessary. Alusson could benefit from more consistency in his game, as it seems as though he has flashes of brilliance and stretches where he isn't playing his best hockey. It's why there's a decent chance he could be available at 31. But Alusson is developing in Sweden and should see more opportunities to round out his game this upcoming season. If the Habs have a chance to snag him at 31, they should jump on the opportunity to add more scoring to their prospect system. Alusson has a chance to be a 30-goal scorer in the NHL, and you can never have too many guys like that. The last player we'll talk about is Zachary Bullduck. Like Leroux, he's a French player. He plays in the QMJHL, and he can play both center and wing. He's a tremendous skater, perhaps one of the best in the draft at skating, And that alone bodes well for him to become a good player in the NHL. He's got some versatility. He can play both center and the wing, and that always is a plus. And if he can develop into what he can be, there is a spot in the top 6 with his name on it, I think. He's got a good shot, and he's got good vision. And if those translate into the NHL, I think he can be an excellent secondary scorer on a successful team. I don't know if he's a play driver. I don't know if he can, drive his own line and be the best offensive player on his own line. At least not in a top 6 role. At pick 31, though, he should be good value, and much like any of these prospects, it's kind of unclear exactly where he could get drafted. Some scouts are really high on him, and others have their concerns. He might not be the great play driver, and that kind of makes him a tough player to read and get a pick for. And there are some questions regarding if he can be consistent. But he has the tools to be a good two-way forward, and as mentioned, he can chip in offensively, and he can make an impact there. I think the Habs can go this route, and if they do, they add more speed to a forward core that's already loaded with tremendous skaters, from Josh Anderson to Cole Caulfield to in the system like Jesse Ylonen. Adding more speed never hurts, and Zachary Bullduck will definitely help with that. The question becomes, when the Canadiens come to pick at 31, are there going to be better options available? Only time will really tell. So now it comes down to talking about what we might see the Canadiens do if they don't want to draft 31st. There's options here. If they want to trade up, they can do that. This is the one thing that's always kind of been interesting about Marc Bergevin. People have talked about he's never traded one of his first-round picks before. Never. But he's also never acquired another first-round pick, which I think is kind of funny. He's basically been stagnant. So I went ahead and I said they draft Scott Morrow. That might not be the case, but I went with him because I think he's probably the safest pick in terms of, I'm almost positive if any of these guys are going to be available, it's between him and Bullduck, I think. But even then, I have no idea. But we talked about it. They have to address the right side of their defense. But I'm curious. We know that Marc Bergevin is a guy who's not afraid to make moves, and yet he's never traded up in the first round before. He's never acquired another first-round pick. And, the Canadiens have to address the right side of their defense. This is one of the few times where you don't really have a choice but to draft by need because they have no right defense in their prospect pool. And they have to find a right defenseman for this season, regardless of if they draft one in this draft. But I think they have to kind of address it. And if they like somebody, they can't afford to not pick them up. They have to be aggressive. And I'm curious if they're going to use some of these 11 draft picks they have to trade up and maybe move up a little bit in this draft to go and take, maybe it's Corson Ceulemans, maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. But I would like to see Marc Bergevin be a little bit more aggressive because I don't think the Canadiens need to draft 31st overall. And if they don't want to trade up, how about they use the pick to maybe trade for somebody who can make an impact right now? The Canadiens are not going to be a playoff team if they lose Weber and they lose Price for a portion of the season. If they don't have any replacements in order, if they just kind of go in and they lose Deneau, they lose Weber, they lose Price, they're in trouble. And they've got a lot of cap space to make up for that, but cap space only does so much if nobody wants to come play here, right? Dougie Hamilton, big free agent, would be a great player in place of Weber. But if he doesn't want to sign here, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at him, he's not coming. So maybe that first-round pick is going to be a big help in drafting somebody, but maybe it helps them trade for somebody right now. Maybe they can move up. I don't know. But they have to have options. They have to take advantage of that because after Dougie Hamilton, the right defenseman pool in free agency is only so good. After Dougie Hamilton, the best right defenseman available, maybe it's Tyson Barrie. And even then, if I was Marc Bergevin, I would prefer he didn't sign him. And it sounds like he might be going back to Edmonton anyways. Maybe Marc Bergevin's plan is to not be good this year. Maybe he's perfectly fine with them not having a good year, with the draft in Montreal having a top 10 pick, and getting a chance to draft a guy like Shane Wright. I don't know. All I know is, if that's the case, then you definitely don't want to draft 31st overall this year. You want to move up. You want to get a better prospect. You want a player who's going to be a couple years away from being an impact player on your team. Drafting 31st overall lowers the chances of that happening. Now, I'm not saying Marc Bergevin absolutely has to trade this pick. I'm fine if these guys are available there, but I think if you have the opportunity to draft a player who can make an impact down the road, but you're not sure he's going to be available at 31st. Maybe you use that pick in a couple seconds or a third or whatever it takes to move up a little bit. Maybe you do that. Maybe be a little bit more aggressive. Because the fact of the matter is, we talk about it, they need to address the right side of their defense. And if they're running out of good options by the time they get to 31st, I think that's a bit of a failure. If Scott Morrow is taken, if Corson Ceulemans is taken, because you didn't trade up, I think that's a bit of an issue. Because it may not seem like it's that big of a deal, especially if these guys are not going to contribute right away. But I don't think waiting for them to come to you is a good idea if they're not going to be available. And I don't think Marc Bergevin can afford to not address the right side of their defense any longer. And quite frankly, there are left-wing options that I wouldn't mind, but I do think that they have to go right defense. I mean, they can't ask Alexander Romanov to continue to play on his off-wing, offside the entire year. It's just tough to ask a young player to do that. And I don't think that that's smart. I think they have to go out and get somebody for this season, but I think they have to do it in this draft too. And I want to see him be aggressive. I want to see him take a chance. That's all I'm saying. I don't know who it is just yet. I'd have to do a little bit more digging, a little bit more research to see, okay, who's available. But I do think that there has to be a sense of urgency here to address that. That's just my 2 cents. Anyways, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. I'd appreciate that a lot. What do you guys want to see Marc Bergevin do? Who do you want him to draft? Do you want to see him make a trade? Let me know. I'm always interested in hearing those sort of things. And again, thanks so much for watching, guys. And make sure to tune in next week for episode 3.